Hosea had made a name for himself as one of the top social media influencers in his city. Companies loved to work with him, and he nailed down endorsement after endorsement. He loved to tell his come-up story. He had fought the battle against lack and poverty and tussled it out till he made it to the top of his field. And because his life growing up had been so full of worry and uncertainty, he loved to go all out in everything he did, especially when it came to celebrations. For him, there was always a reason to celebrate. He always found an excuse, however small. It helped him to be more grateful for what he had now. His birthday was around the corner, but he had already thrown 2 parties at his mansion that month. He called them the birthday series. All the socialites around town made it a point to be at each party. His raves always made it to the entertainment news pages and social media channels because of the affluence and sheer popularity of the attendees. For his actual birthday celebration, he decided to do things a bit differently. He was going to take a trip with some of his friends to a resort by the lakeside. The plan was to go for an excursion. His birthday weekend was in December and most of his friends were off work, so it was the opportune time to go on a holiday. They hired a van and off they went. They took it easy from the time they arrived, relaxing by the lake, enjoying good food, drink, and some classics from back in the day as they ushered in the night. The weekend ahead of them promised a good time. The following day, they had plans to hire a boat and head out into the lake and have some fun in the water, swimming, diving, and whatever else. That afternoon, they got some food and chill drinks and set off to go get the boat, and soon they were in the water. The sun was still out, and the way its light hit the lake's crystal clear waters was amazing. They looked forward to seeing the sunset and the beautiful colors it would bring as it danced with the lake. When all their musings were over, and before it got dark, they decided to take the party back ashore. Hosea decided to take one last dive before they set off. The rest of the crew cheered the birthday boy as he leapt off the boat and into the water. The fun went on until Elaine, his girlfriend, felt like he had been under for quite a bit. She called out to his best friend, Josh, and he waved her off, recounting how wonderful a swimmer Hosea was. He had probably taken a deep dive. He liked to challenge himself sometimes. But 2 minutes later, there was still no sign of Hosea. Everyone on the boat started to panic. So naturally, they called out to him. But there was no response. Some of the girls warned him that it was not funny and now was not the time to be a prankster. Josh signaled to one of his other friends, Norman, and they dived into the lake from either side of the boat. The current was somewhat strong, but they managed to swim around and search for Hosea. But given that it was beginning to get dark, visibility was quite poor. Soon, they re-emerged from the lake, having not seen or found Hosea. Elaine and some of her friends got hysterical as they came face to face with the daunting fact about what could have happened to him. Things were not looking good. What had been a festive mood just a few minutes ago evolved into a dark somberness that just seemed to get darker as the minutes ticked on. It did not make sense. To the best of their knowledge, the lake had been very calm. Besides, Hosea was such a good swimmer. He loved the water, and the way he glided through it on a leisurely evening swim made this even more confusing. Where was he? Was he playing a nasty game on the eve of his birthday? For some reason, they all decided to sit in the boat and wait for their friend to show up. It was now almost fully dark, and any rays of hope of his return were rapidly disappearing with the last rays of daylight. Surely, their friend was not saying bye like this. The longer they waited, the more hopeless they became. As reality began to slowly take a hold of them, they headed ashore to the resort and called for a search and rescue team. They came a quarter of an hour later and set out to the lake in a bid to find him. They took Josh with them to help them show them the area where his friend had most likely dived into the lake. When they got there, the rescue team took turns diving into the lake to look for Hosea. They had lighting to help them see in the water. After about 30 minutes of the dive and search exercise, they confirmed that if Hosea was still in the water, he had indeed drowned. All efforts moving forward would be geared towards finding his body. The search party resolved to go out the next day to try and find Hosea because it was now too dark to continue any useful search efforts. When they got back to the resort, all his friends were waiting anxiously. They looked out and saw Josh thanking the search and rescue team, and as he walked towards them, his forlorn face and hanging head told them all they needed to know. Elaine began to sob uncontrollably, screaming her boyfriend's name and shouting repeatedly, "No, it can't be. Don't leave me, Hosea." Her friends did all they could to calm her down, and although she was inconsolable, they managed to eventually help her to get a hold of herself. At this point, she received a call from Hosea's brother, Hunter. He mentioned something about Hosea not picking up his phone and him deciding to call her since he knew they were together. "Just checking in on my big bro and how the party weekend is carrying on," he said. She tearfully told him everything that had happened and how their celebratory evening boat ride had turned into the worst nightmare. Hunter could be heard screaming on the other end of the call. He asked repeatedly whether this was some sort of sick joke, begging Elaine over and over to please tell him this was not true, that it was a prank, that Hosea was actually there with her. He was clearly devastated. The friends stayed in the lobby all night. It was like they had frozen there and could not move. They were literally numb. A few hours later, the news started to get around that something had happened at the beach resort and that Hosea had been involved in an accident. Leading media houses picked up the story as well, and soon the whole city knew about Hosea's situation. The finer details were still being pieced together, but the confirmation of his death had been made. Several journalists and reporters started to trickle into the resort to give live updates of the story. Elaine and the rest of Hosea's friends felt too overwhelmed to say anything, so all information came from the search and rescue team. They all but confirmed Hosea's death in a drowning accident and that efforts to find his body would continue in the morning. The mood on social media was somber as people talked about Hosea and what he had been to them. It was an outpouring of love from the digital world. The following day, more media reports continued to come out concerning Hosea. The main interest of the public was now to find his body. His family had released a statement thanking them for their support and asking them to pray that he would be found. It would give them the much-needed closure they longed for, the statement said. Early on the morning of what would have been his 27th birthday, the search and rescue team began their efforts to find Hosea. By afternoon, he was still nowhere to be found. As the search and rescue team continued to solve the strange puzzle of Hosea's disappearance, his friends back at the resort considered going ahead with his birthday celebrations as planned. They believed it was what Hosea would have wanted. This would be a celebration of his life and a remembrance of the good man that he had been to them. The day ended with a choreographed session of his favorite dance moves and a highlight reel of his most-watched videos off his various social media accounts. The next morning, a press release was scheduled by the search and rescue team and it was eagerly awaited by the general public. Whereas the family had been informed of its contents, it was felt that given the very public nature of this operation and who Hosea had been to the city, they deserved to know as well. With the family's go-ahead, the head of the team delivered the news everyone feared. Hosea had not been found, but sadder still, the rescue efforts were being called off. The reasoning behind this was that they had done all they could with the resources they had. They also mentioned that Hosea had most probably been a victim of whirlpool activity within the water, and that it was this activity that had most likely sucked him into the lake and drowned him. This could also explain why he could not be found despite all the search efforts. On the 5th day after Hosea's tragic accident, some local fishermen that lived on an island a few miles off the beach resort were going through their daily routine cleaning their nets before heading out later to fish. One of them noticed that there was something lying on the shore. Actually, it was someone. It was strange because why would a man be randomly sleeping by the lakeside early in the morning? He summoned his friends to go check it out with him, and as they approached it, they covered their nostrils with their hands because the smell was almost unbearable. This was not a man lying on the shore. Well, it was, but he was by no means alive. He had definitely drowned in the lake and had been washed ashore by the waves during the night. When they got to him, they noted a severely rotten body that had a bracelet on its left arm. They made a call to the police and described what they had seen. The police, having been on the lookout since the news of Hosea's drowning broke, went down to the shore to investigate and find out who it was. Indeed, the body was that of Hosea. News of his findings spread rather quickly around the city, and soon he was the talk of the town again. There was a general feeling of relief that the body had been found, and the arrangements for his funeral were quickly made. Even though his family was wealthy and could easily afford to cover the funeral costs, Hosea's friends decided to pay these because of what Hosea meant to each of them and the love they had for him. He had been found, much to their relief, but they still wished he was here with them. Given the way he had left without so much as a goodbye, they felt it was only right they gave him a befitting send-off. At his funeral, Hosea's friends and family described the kind of man he was: gentle, loving, and kind. As Elaine eulogized him, she spoke of the dreams they had and how she had gifted him a bracelet when they found out they would be having a baby together. It had been only 2 months since they got the news, so they had not told anybody yet. Even though it was sad that he was not around anymore, he had left a part of him behind, and whether it was a boy or a girl, his unborn child would know about what a great man he had been.